somehow the Brian Norman and Boots situation has turned into a fight between two guys that, are known in America to some extent. Not, I wouldn't say big. They're not megastars yet, but, they're good. Boots is a little bit, obviously a lot bigger, but has now turned into one of the biggest fight disputes and public knowledge disputes that we've had in recent times. I mean, it's honestly eclipsing and getting near to what Canelo Benavidez was, at least at some points of it. And this is a fight that should never get to this big. It's not that big of a deal at the end of the day. But because of how much data has been leaked out about the situation, because of how much talk there's been, I figured, you know what? Let's just get to the facts and let's break this down. So those that know me know I like to get to the facts. I don't like making rumors up. I don't like doing these things. So I'm just going to take quotes that we have legitimate facts from the situation. And so let's go back about a week or so. Brian Norman Jr.'s father, and he's also his trainer, Brian Norman Sr., he said that they are now very close to a deal to fight Jaron Boots Ennis in an IBF and WBO welterweight world title unification fight on November 9th in Philadelphia. He said, and I quote, "We want this fight to happen. Ennis wants this fight to happen. The welterweight division needs this fight to happen, and we're going to make it happen." Well, those that are currently here with me know that did not happen, and that was just about a week ago. So Eddie Hearn comes down, he says this, essentially giving a little backstory before we get to the full quote. He says the first offer made to Brian Norman was nicely over $1 million. Then 2 more offers later, $250,000 more every time. Remember, the key part here, Brian Norman made $100K last fight. And I'm going to release the number here in a minute about what he's going to get paid for the fight now agreed to. We'll get to that in a second. Here's the quote that Eddie Hearn said in regards to this negotiation. "Keep getting told we're close, and we go back and make another offer. And we're told by his team that we're actually not that close." And I start to think, Brian Norman, do you want this fight, or are you just clout chasing? Or as others might say over here, cap, or whatever it is. But it's like, do you want to be great, Brian Norman? Like, not being funny. Who is Brian Norman? I know Brian Norman's a good fighter, but no one knows who Brian Norman is. We're giving you a bucket load of money and an opportunity for you to unify the division. And in my opinion, one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the world. Now you say Boots is overrated. You say he's not the boogeyman. Then why wouldn't you take this bucket load of money to prove you're the best welterweight in the world? So let's just stop with the interviews online. We've gone back 3 times now with more money, to a point, like, with all due respect to Brian Norman, he shouldn't be making this kind of money, but we're ready and we're prepared to pay him. And then we get told, "Oh, you're miles off." I don't believe this of Brian Norman and the team. If you want the fight, you would have taken it. All right. Then another interview, Eddie Hearn comes out and says this next part. Eddie Hearn then said that the last offer Brian Norman Jr. declined was $1.7 million, and it was a 50-50 purse split with Jaron Boots Ennis. All right. Now let me get a little financial with you guys, okay? Because here's the dispute, the other side of this now. We look at Brian Norman, and his part of his deal with Top Rank, if I'm not mistaken, this number I found, is 25% the Top Rank gets for him crossing the street, which that would equate to $425,000. And that would essentially mean that when you deduct the payment of 1.7 minus 425,000, you get to $1.275 million. And I agree with that 100%. For those that are skeptical as to why Top Rank can do that to him, Top Rank's given him his last 5 fights. And that's been in a 2-year time span. And ultimately, we have to remember the job of promoters is to make money. It is a return investment. It is a business. There's no problem with what Top Rank is doing in this scenario. Therefore, I want to get to this other side now again. That's the aspect, but still, that's a lot of money. $1.275 million, drastically over $1 million more than what he made at his last fight. So let's continue with on the Brian Norman side of what's happening here. I get this part. For your being Brian Norman, you would essentially be going into the Lions Den to fight Boots, right? You're going into his turf. You're going to Philadelphia, his promotional deal, all these different factors. Is that worth it to a young fighter? Brian Norman's got a bright future ahead of him. I like the guy. He's a good fighter. He's got a bright future. He's already a champion. He's going to be a great fighter for a very long time. What I have to ask, though, is would this make sense for him to fight? And from a fighter standpoint, you should always be willing to fight whoever, whenever, if that really is the lifestyle you're living. Clearly, this is not the case, though. But is that worth it? And you could obviously debate that. It might not be worth it. It might be too early of a run of a fight. And I even said that last time. I said last show, this fight makes more sense than the Boots and Bud Crawford fight. But I even wouldn't mind Norman waiting 2 or 3 fights still to fight him, because I think there was a little bit of a gap in talent. That being said, though, you could say from Brian Norman's side, well, why couldn't Boots give back a little bit of money to make this fight happen? Okay, sure. Or you also might wonder, why did Turkey not get involved to make it happen, knowing his relationship with Eddie Hearn? And I know I saw rumors out there. Like I said, I don't like rumors. I'm not going to just state them all. But one thing I saw, seeing a lot of people seem to be attracted to this take, was the plan was never to make the fight happen, and the duck was almost a perception, essentially saying that there were some rules in place that you only, once the mandatory ends up going into place and effect, then you can't negotiate to make a unifying fight. That's what it is. But, was it something that Eddie Hearn was just hypothetically doing? I don't believe that's true, because we know for a fact that there was money negotiations happening based upon Brian Norman Sr.'s take when he talked about the fact that they were going back and forth on deals and just could not agree. So that's that part. I don't really believe in all that happening. So for my stance, I look at this and I say it had to be a ducking episode. And I don't necessarily blame Brian Norman. I get it, but you can't avoid the fact of what this was. Because if you truly want to be great, you are going to be willing to make the sacrifice to be great. And once you become great, if that's what you believe, then the money is going to come. I understand you have to protect the fighter. You must do that. You have to get the guys built up in the right ways. But this is the biggest payday of his life, and maybe will be one of the biggest paydays of his entire life, regardless of what happens going forward. It's hard to turn that type of fight down, especially when you believe that you're truly capable of beating him. If you think you could beat him and you're getting that kind of money, why would you not take the fight? So obviously with skepticism as to whether or not he's ready for that, and I understand that. But so many of the great fighters have taken fights that they were at a disadvantage of. And that's how you make your name. Pulling off those mega upsets is what makes boxers special and what makes them legendary. And by denying that right now is honestly something you do have to have a little skepticism about. Because, there's not a lot of money he's going to go get. And so I'm going to announce in a second what the new fight deal is. And it makes the whole issue laughable. But at the same time, the whole situation with Boots also doesn't look very good at this moment. So we look at all the situations, and ultimately, we don't know the exact stories of what happened. But in my opinion, it looks like Brian Norman did duck the situation in this fight. So then I have to say, well, what's next for Brian Norman Jr.? Well, it's now been announced he's going to defend his WBO welterweight world title. And he's going to be on the undercard of Keyshawn Davis on November 8th. The big part about this now, though, is that he earns $200,000 to fight on a prospect's undercard. You went from headlining a main event in Philadelphia, making over $1 million, and now you're going to get $200K to fight on a prospect's undercard. It does not seem like something that makes much sense to me. It seems like he probably lost out on the situation. But then you flip around, and today we get more news then that here's Boots' situation, and here's the thread of tweets that we've been going on about today. Jaron Ennis, he looks set to go ahead with his IBF mandatory rematch, and that was what went into place against Karen Chukajan. And depending on what happens in the purse bids, he said he's planning for it to be a super show in the USA in November, including another big world title fight. Now, Karen's promoters, P2M, Box Promotions, have reportedly won the purse bids for the Boots Ennis mandatory rematch after outbidding Eddie Hearn's matchroom by around $250,000. The fight is for Ennis' IBF welterweight world title, and it's unclear if he may now vacate. There's a lot of concerns with this. When we have all this stuff going on, and we had a fight that was appealing, we had a fight that was going to be worth a lot, there was a fight that was going to be interesting, a unifying fight, and now we're sitting in a situation where we have Brian Norman Jr. fighting on the undercard against something that nobody really wants to watch. And we also see Boots Ennis in a fight that literally nobody wants to watch, that Eddie Hearn didn't put down the money for to be able to let him fight in that situation. And I don't blame Eddie Hearn at all. I don't think it's a fight that anybody wants. He would have lost money there, regardless. So now you have to ask the question, though, because now he's in a position that Boots might have to move up weight class and give up his belt. And what I was thinking of when we look at this, Boots had a position to possibly become undisputed at 147. It was going to be tough, especially if these situations were going to keep occurring. But 147 is not a good division. And when Boots, and if and or when Boots moves up to 154, 147 is probably the worst division in all of boxing. Let's just make it obvious and clear. Therefore, when you look at the situation for Boots, it didn't really work out well. You could have unified, and you could have went for undisputed one day. Now that's not the case in a situation at all. And he's fighting a fight that nobody wants to see. And if not, he's going to have to, vacate the belt. So the previous stated was that he could not vacate the IBF welterweight world title and move up for his next fight. As Eddie Hearn has said, he reached out to Sergey Boachuk, and he's also considering Israel Madrimov. Other option is IBF mandatory rematch against Chukajan, which we just discussed. If he moves to 154, 154 automatically becomes one of, if not the best division in boxing. I think it already is possibly right there, but Boots just makes it even more spectacular weight class. I don't really want to. I mean, there's so many fights you can make at 154 that would be interesting. If Boots wants to go that route, it might make sense. Is it great for his legacy? I don't know. But can he make a lot of money? Can he get big fights? Yes, that can happen right away if you go to 154. Therefore, when you look at this, there's a lot of fights I like to see. There's a lot of big fights you can make at 154. The ones that came to mind for myself are these four, though. Virgil Ortiz, I want that one the most. Jermell Charlo, he's supposedly back. I like to see that one. Israel Madrimov would like to see that one, and Tim Tszyu all for that one. Now, obviously, Tim's is booked for his next fight, so we'll see what happens there. Everyone's going to say, well, Boots. Yeah, I said this last show. Not yet for Boots. I don't really want to see the Boots fight yet or Boots with Bud. So I don't want to see the Bud fight yet. Sorry about that. I messed that up. I don't want to see Bud yet because I don't think that fight's going to work well. Boots is not really ready for Bud, in my opinion, at this point in time. Maybe in a year or so. Maybe. But is Bud even going to be still fighting, or is he going to be retired by that point in time? We don't know. So there might not ever be that fight, but it does not make sense for Boots. I don't think Boots beats Bud at this point in time. I don't think it's going to be that close. And I'd take Bud in a heartbeat over Boots at this point in time. So that's not the one I want to see yet, but it could happen later on, in my opinion. But since he is staying at 147 potentially for now to become undisputed, that's got to be the decision. Like, do you either seriously pursue going undisputed at 147, or are you going to go for bigger fights and make more money at 154? That's the decision he has to make now, because he could have went back and officially decided to give back money to Norman and get that fight done with. He didn't want to do that. So it almost makes you wonder, is 154 the path he wants to go on? And if so, I'm all for that. Go make a big fight at 154, and let's see that happen if Boots wants to move up there. And if that's the plan all along, then great. All worked out great.